There is no mercy for the innocent civilians of Warhammer 40K. I don't remember the moment I died, only the hollow, oppressive silence that followed, the stillness of a city that no longer breathed. The air tastes of iron, soot, and bitter regret. It clings to my throat as I drift through these empty streets. Shadows stretch long and warped across the broken walkways, carrying the faint echoes of lives that once were. I hear whispers trapped in walls of steel and stone, voices of the forgotten, calling without answer. I was one of them, a worker, a believer, a fool who thought obedience could save me. Now, only dust, ash, and the memory of fear remain. I am unseen, unheard, a ghost among the ruins, tracing the shapes of my lost world, knowing that even in silence, the city remembers. He said that pain itself was proof of devotion, that suffering was the Emperor's unseen blessing, a fire meant to forge the soul. I remember his eyes, blazing with zeal, a conflagration of madness and conviction that seared the marrow of all who looked upon him. We knelt not because we believed, but because terror shaped our knees like chains. Each sermon tore at our spirits, stripping away our thoughts, our hope, until only obedience remained. Even now, beyond death, I still hear his voice, cutting through the haze of smoke and ruin, echoing in the corridors of memory, promising salvation through agony, yet leaving only ash, doubt, and a gnawing ache that never fades. The weight of faith pressed on me then, and it presses still, even in the silence of the grave. Beneath the towering spires, the city suffocated us with shadows and smoke, a labyrinth of rusted pipes and burning vents where fear thrived. The Arbites moved like living judgment, relentless, faceless, armored saints whose boots pounded the streets like drums of doom. You could hear them long before their presence became flesh and metal, and by that time, it was already too late. Their words promised order, but their eyes spoke only of terror. Even now, in death, the echo of those boots haunts me, shaking the bones of my memory. Every alley, every corner, every flicker of light reminded me that obedience was survival, and survival came at the cost of hope, trust, and the simple right to exist without fear. The city consumed us all, but its echoes never die. We clawed and fought over moldy bread like animals trapped in a cage, each crumb a prize, each glance a threat. The ration dispensers coughed out more dust than sustenance, their mechanical hum a cruel reminder that the system saw us as nothing. I remember the taste, metallic, bitter, chemical-laced, yet it was called a meal, and we swallowed it anyway. Hunger reshaped us. Neighbors became scavengers, friends turned into thieves, and silence held more meaning than words. Days blurred into each other, gray and indistinguishable, dawn offering no relief, only the bitter light of survival under the Emperor's gaze. Every shadow promised something to steal or something to fear. Yet even in that emptiness, the fragile thread of hope persisted, fleeting but stubborn. I found her hidden beneath the wreckage, small, fragile, trembling with every sound of falling debris, clutching a torn, soot-streaked doll as if it were a shield against the world. Her eyes were impossibly wide, uncomprehending yet sharp, absorbing the horror around her. I whispered that she must not speak, that silence could mean life, and she nodded slowly, though I could tell she understood more than I could say. The Arbites didn't hesitate. To them, innocence carried no weight. It was a crime in itself, a mark of vulnerability. Every movement, every shadow made her flinch, and I felt the unbearable burden of protecting someone too young to bear it. Even through my death, I can still see her small face, haunted but defiant, a fleeting flicker of hope in a city that devours all light. I always thought servitors were monsters, living flesh replaced by cold steel, screams muted by their mechanical hearts. Every step they took echoed like a sentence, each movement precise and inhuman. But this one stopped, paused for a moment when it saw me. Its single red eye flickered against the dark corridor, lingering longer than it should, as if it remembered something lost to time. A family, a face, a life before the machine. Maybe it had been a worker, a father, someone who laughed or cried like me once. And now, stripped of will and voice, it moved silently through the corridors of the Imperium, a ghost of its former self. In that fleeting gaze, I understood that mercy was not missing here. It had been erased, obliterated by metal and order, leaving only the hollow shell of what once lived. He returned from the front lines, not as a man, but as a specter wearing flesh, every step heavy with the weight of unseen battles. His armor, blackened and scarred, carried the grime of worlds I would never know, and each dent and burn told a story of survival amidst endless slaughter. His eyes, haunted, hollow, held wars I could not comprehend, visions of comrades lost, cities razed, and the quiet screams of those who died alone. He spoke of victory, yet his voice shook like brittle glass, trembling beneath memories too heavy for speech. I could see the man he once was, buried beneath layers of ash, fatigue, and grief. And in that moment, I understood that the front never truly let go. It followed him home, through corridors of ruin, leaving only shadows and echoes in its wake. The priest's voice carried over the smoke-choked streets, declaring that the Emperor observed even the most forsaken souls. We moved as shadows, barefoot and broken, our chains dragging across the ash-strewn ground, clattering with each reluctant step. Faces streaked with soot and tears turned toward the sky, hoping for signs of mercy that never came. Some cried aloud, voices cracked and raw, begging for relief or understanding, while others remained silent, their hearts numb to hope. Every step seemed to stretch into eternity, the weight of obedience crushing what little remained of our spirit. I felt each link of the chain press against my wrists as a reminder of the devotion demanded, the lives consumed, and the faith that bound us like iron. Even after death, I can hear the echoes, the priest's fervent chant, the clanging chains, the whispers of despair mingling with incense smoke, a melody of suffering that never ends. The sirens wailed like the cry of 1,000 dying souls, cutting through the oppressive fog that choked the streets. Then came the boots, heavy, metallic, inevitable. The Arbites in their black armor moved as a single, faceless force, silent and unrelenting, their weapons gleaming faintly under the flickering red lights of the alarms. They judged without mercy, their eyes never leaving those they hunted. One word, a whispered prayer, a fleeting glance, and families vanished, swallowed by fire and smoke, leaving only despair in their wake. I hid the child behind me, feeling the tremor in her small body, aware that innocence offered no shield here. Every step I took, every breath I drew, reminded me of the cruel precision of their order. Even in death, I can hear the echo of those boots, and the cold certainty that mercy had no place amidst the cold justice of the Imperium. I reached out, desperate, clutching at her tiny hand, but the crowd was a living, merciless wall, tearing us apart with its blind panic. Her scream pierced the smoke and sirens, but it was swallowed by the chaos, lost in the roar of fire and the grinding machinery of the city. I called her name again and again, my voice hoarse and raw, but the echoes returned nothing, only the oppressive sound of my own failure. Her small body disappeared into the crowd, and I felt the weight of emptiness settle into my chest. The dust stung my eyes, smoke clung to my lungs, and the fires reflected in the broken glass like a cruel mockery of hope. Even in death, the memory of that night gnaws at me. The helplessness, the terror, the finality of a world that devours innocence as easily as it crushes faith. The blinding lights above me seared my eyes, yet I couldn't look away, restrained, broken, and trembling. They asked questions that made no sense, accusing me of sins I had never committed, of names I had never heard. Every hesitant reply was met with impatient glare, every pause twisted into evidence of guilt. I could feel my own voice weakening, a thread fraying in the void, and the realization hit me that they no longer cared for truth. The air was thick with the scent of metal and oil, the hum of machinery drowning any hope of mercy. Even as my body ached and my mind screamed, the light never dimmed, casting long, cruel shadows over every inch of the chamber. I was a ghost in my own life, powerless, stripped of choice, watched by eyes that saw only obedience and nothing human. Chains cut into my wrists as cold mechanical arms hauled me through corridors that reeked of oil, blood, and smoke. Walls lined with gears and pipes hissing steam. The air itself seemed alive, groaning with the echoes of the countless souls that had passed here before me. Ahead, the Servitor moved with relentless purpose, its red ocular lens scanning the corridor, casting cold reflections across the metal walls. For a fleeting heartbeat, its gaze lingered on me. A hollow recognition, a spark of what might have once been human. I imagined it remembering its life before the machine, a father, a worker, a man with dreams. And in that moment, I saw my own fate mirrored in its augmetic limbs. The corridors stretched endlessly, and I realized mercy had no place here, only function, only the silent, inescapable transformation into another instrument of the Imperium. I knelt in chains, the cold iron biting into my skin, as the priest raised the censer high, smoke curling around his flowing robes and filling the chamber with the acrid scent of sanctity. The Arbites officer stood beside him, rigid and unyielding, a sentinel of law and terror. Each word of my indictment echoed off the vaulted walls, each syllable a hammer striking my already shattered soul. Flames danced along the banners behind them, casting long, flickering shadows that made the chamber seem alive with judgment. I felt every gaze pierce me, every sigil and burning candle a silent accusation. In that oppressive light, my thoughts clung to the child I'd tried to protect, a flicker of innocence I could not save. Yet the ritual pressed onward, relentless, leaving me hollow. No mercy, no reprieve, only the inexorable weight of the Imperium's law and the fire that would claim me. The fire consumed me from the outside in, the heat searing my skin, the scent of burning oil and incense mingling in my nostrils. My chains rattled as the flames licked the iron post, and I screamed, a raw sound swallowed by the roaring blaze. Yet even as agony ripped through me, my mind clung to her, the wounded child, trembling beneath the ruins, clutching her torn doll. Could she still see the world, unbroken? I imagined her small face streaked with soot, eyes wide, still alive, perhaps even hopeful. Every crackling ember reminded me of all that was lost, yet in that burning inferno, one thought persisted. Mercy may have abandoned me, but she might still walk in it. I felt the weight of the Imperium's judgment and the silence of a world that moved on, leaving me behind as smoke and ash. I drift now as a ghost among the endless towers and choking machinery, unseen, unheard, yet watching all unfold. The Hive continues its tireless rhythm. The machines clank and hum, indifferent to the lives they consume. Priests chant prayers into the smog-heavy air, their words hollow, echoing through corridors where screams once rang. Enforcers march with unyielding precision, faces masked, eyes empty of empathy. I watch the living move through their rituals and wars, and I am neither part nor observer, a whisper in the wind, fading with every step they take. Yet in the midst of decay, my gaze finds her, the wounded child, small and fragile beneath the ruins. She walks on, clutching her doll, surviving where I could not. And in that, I find a fragile hope, a testament that even in a city ruled by death and iron, life persists, silent, stubborn, and defiant.